Check, 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 check. Still hold it close.
Sure.
Welcome everybody. I know we still have a few more people coming in. We're so pleased to have you here tonight for the first of two really important conversations. I'm here today with Joe Hathaway, and it's just a pleasure to have you here at the congregation. So over the course of the next two nights, what we're going to do is we're going to have really important conversations with both our Republican and our Democratic candidate for NJ11. And we're going to talk about not only their vision for the country and for New Jersey, but also some issues that we in our congregation care deeply about as well. So before we formally get started, I want to thank Carrie Shavat. Where's Carrie? Who set tonight up. This is part of what we call the Temple Talk series, and Carrie, we're so pleased to have you. And I know we've got a number of people who are joining us virtually. If that's you, we want to welcome you as well. And so just a few ground rules that I want to set. First, most importantly, we are not taking questions tonight, but we have questions that you can write. And so if you hear something, feel free quietly to get up, to write a question, to put it in the basket. We'll have probably time for a few at the end, and I'll go through and find them. Second, we want everybody to be very respectful, which means no calling out, no noises, no cheering or booing tonight. And so hopefully everyone understands that you are in a sanctuary. And third, this is something we talked about, and I'll mention this tomorrow as well. The purpose of our conversation is to affirmatively understand what our two candidates stand for. So you'll see tonight, they're going to be speaking about who they are, not who their opponent is. And you can make up, if you go to both sessions, your mind and compare and contrast in that way. And so we're going to begin with just an easy first question. Hopefully this is something you've answered a lot, which is, you got a newborn baby, you got a lot going on in your life. Why are you running for this?
Yeah, now that you put it that way, actually, maybe I'm rethinking this whole thing. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you, Rabbi, for having me, and thank you everyone for being here tonight and taking time out of your evening to come and hear what I have to say. I really appreciate it, and the opportunity to be back here. I was telling the Rabbi, I grew up in Clifton. My dad used to own the old Feedbag Bar on the other side of Broad Street. And when I was little, I went to Brookdale Christian School here at the church, right around the corner. So like I, driven by here like a million times in my life, but hadn't had a chance to come in before. So
welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's funny when we started this race back in October, we had two little ones at home. Then we had three. Now we have three little ones at home. So we added one to the team in the middle of all this. So I don't know. I guess my wife and I are like, let's just do all the hard stuff at once. Just run for Congress, have kids, whatever. Just let's get over it now. But the reason we got in this race from the very beginning, and still what drives me today is really a twofold piece of this for me. Both my role as a mayor and councilman at the local level, and also my role as a dad, as you kind of mentioned. I'll take the local leader part first, because I think it's an important one. But so I've served as a councilman in Randolph Township over in Morris County for, I guess, the last 4 years now. We have a little different form of government than I think you guys do here in Bloomfield, Montclair, Glen Ridge, but we have what's called a rotating mayor system. So we serve one-year terms as mayor. It's selected by the council, so a little different than some towns that have a strong mayor system. But so last year I served as mayor. I've served as a council member for 4 years. And one thing I've noticed over this time is a lot of our communities in this district, certainly a lot of unique elements, but there's a lot of similarities, especially when it comes to local government, and especially when it comes to the challenges that our local governments are facing, whether it's budgeting, health insurance, fourth round of housing mandates, infrastructure, like a lot of the same stuff, maybe a different flavor, but a lot of the same challenges. And I've thought a lot recently about the fact that, or really the question in my mind of, man, if we had a representative in Washington who had served as a mayor or who had served at the local level, honestly, like regardless of party, quite frankly, but if we had that mayor's mindset down in Washington, someone who knew, if I can bring back resources, I know how to deploy them, or I know how our communities can benefit from these resources. I'm telling you, that would be such a huge boost for quality of life for all of our residents. Because you all know, right? Our local governments really, at the end, your mayor affects your daily life way more than your senator or the president, right? The national, it's what happens on the ground. And the idea to me of having someone with that local leader mindset going to Washington and being able to help solve some of the problems we're facing is a huge opportunity. And so that was one reason I got into this in the first place, because I think we can bring some good ideas to the table to help solve some very specific problems we deal with at the local level. But then you look at the bigger picture, just as you know, at my stage right now, I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-month-old. I see a lot of other young families, young parents, or even people who aren't parents yet, but kind of thinking about it. And I think a lot of my generation in particular, I think we grew up kind of believing that America was a place where, New Jersey, where if you work hard, if you make the most of your God-given talent, if you do things the right way, you can be successful here. You can achieve your goals, whatever success looks like, you can do it here. And I don't know, but I think somewhere along the way, if you fast forward to 2026, I think a lot of younger people especially kind of look around and feel like, something got broke along the way here, guys, because this is not, I did all those things that I was supposed to do, and it hasn't worked out yet. Maybe, you still can't afford to buy a house, or you're not sure if you should start a family yet because you're not sure if you can pay for it, or pay for childcare or health insurance, or all those things, right? Or like if you did buy a home, like, okay, good luck heating and cooling it right now, right? Because energy costs are through the roof. And so there's a lot of these challenges in place that I think a number of generations are dealing with. I feel it as kind of that, millennial generation just, now coming into adulthood. And I think bringing that perspective down to Washington too can help. Especially for the unique challenges that face our district when it comes to affordability, when it comes to costs, right? I mean, that's not nothing new. Elected officials, politicians have been running on those issues in New Jersey for a long, long time. We saw it last year in the governor's race. I think I'd like us to see it less by actually bringing some solutions to the table. But that's why our platform on that side of it is really grounded in how can we, in my opinion, reduce costs and make things more affordable by lowering the role of government, by lowering costs for people. So that's really kind of what's grounded us in the first place. I will say, I do think after the primary on February 5th, I do think this race has been elevated, and I think there's a number of other issues that we're probably going to talk about that have come under a microscope much more frequently for the Jewish community. And so.
Absolutely. I mean, so affordability sounds like one of your strategic priorities. I mean, my next question was going to be, if you had to say 3 of your strategic priorities going to Washington, what would they be? I assume affordability is one, but what else would you add to that list?
Yeah, affordability is definitely one. I think we look at that across a few different spectrums here, whether it's affordable home ownership, whether it's increasing and kind of changing, I think, the point of view on education and looking more at vocational training options for people that don't maybe need or want a 4-year kind of traditional liberal arts degree, whether it's finding ways to make childcare more affordable. Those all kind of fall under that big affordability bucket. I will also tell you a second priority in terms of, it kind of goes back to the first piece we talked about, which is really just bringing resources back here to New Jersey. We're one of the worst states in the country when it comes to bringing we send way more dollars down in tax money to Washington than we ever bring back. We get back about 75 cents on the dollar. When people ask, like, hey, what's one of the first things you can do? I think one of the first things we can do is send someone down to try to bring back resources, maybe whether it's, I think probably infrastructure is the biggest way to do that quickly, to improve, whether it's our rail system here in this part of the district or some of our roads kind of more out by me where it's a little less of a train commuter district. The third thing I'll say is maybe less of a specific, what can I do, but more of a how. Because I do believe, and I think you see the choices in this race, but I believe on our side, a big piece of this for me is also changing the mindset of what a representative is supposed to do when they go to Washington. I believe that the job of a representative is to do that, to represent, to go down on your behalf and cast a vote or raise my voice or advocate for things that are going to be good for the district I represent. Regardless of party, regardless of president, regardless of any factions or anything like that, what's good for the district. And that may mean supporting my side of the aisle, it may mean going against it. It may mean having to come to the table and work with people that I know I don't agree with on something. But the job is the job. And I think Congress has lost that somewhere along the way. So to kind of just round back on that, in terms of what we want to do, yes, affordability, we have to solve it. Bringing back federal dollars, a key role of a legislator, but also the how and the mindset that we bring down, I think is critically important.
So that then leads me to what I would call the job interview part of this conversation, right? It's no mistake that when you're running for Congress, your campaign is your job interview for all of your constituents. And so some of the questions I'm going to ask in the next few minutes are going to feel very job interviewy. But the first one I want to ask is, you go down to Washington, and I remember talking to Mikey Sherrill about this, and it can feel really daunting. You actually don't really know how to do the job when you first get there. If you had one wish of one person currently serving in your party who would be your mentor to take you through, they could be a senator or a representative, who would be that person?
Good question. I would say my mentor of choice, and if he's watching, then great. We can take it. We can work on this. But probably Mike Lawler out of New York. I think he and I are kind of cut from a similar cloth. He's I think he maybe is 1 or 2 years older than me, so I think he's in a similar kind of place in his life. His district is very similar to NJ11. He kind of straddles the Hudson River and has some of Westchester County in that area of the state, and it's a very purple district as well. So I think there's a guy who's been successful doing exactly what we just talked about. I'd love to go down and say, hey, Mike, you're coming from a very similar boat from me. Help me be successful. Coach me up, right? I'm still a football player at heart. Being coachable and trying to learn from people who've come before is, I think, really important.
So tell me a little bit about, we talked about in preparation for today that the big question that everyone has about you is, are you going to be a rubber stamp for everything that Donald Trump wants, or are you going to stand for something on your own? So before we talk about what you believe about Washington and where you break with the Republican Party and where you are with the Republican Party, I think it's worthwhile, another one of these big questions. Where have you taken a stand that was unpopular at some point in your career before this moment?
That's a good question. So I would say before this moment, I think still serving in local government, you have to be unafraid to advocate for things. And I guess it's a similar situation, but if you look at the Randolph Township Council, so we're one party, we're all Republican. So I think on the surface, sometimes people think, that just means you guys are all friends, everybody's in lockstep. How hard can that be? Anybody can do that. Not always the case. Not always the case, especially when you're dealing with local issues that have been one way for a long time, and you're coming in and trying to change things up a bit. I will tell you, we've had there's been a number of instances, whether it's been on some of the bigger issues I would say that we've dealt with in town, around our third and fourth round housing obligation mandates, are some big ones. Our budget conversations are other big ones, where I don't agree with my colleagues on an approach. And for me, it's been interesting because I'm not the newest member of the council, but I was for a couple of years, and I was the youngest member too, and I was one of the few who hadn't kind of grown up in Randolph or been there a long time. And when you're in that position, it can be a little tough. It can be a little tough to say, I know you are my senior, I know you've been here longer, but I'm on the council too. I have a seat and I have a voice, and people expect me to use it in the role. And so there was a few, look, I'll say most of those disagreements generally happen behind closed doors, because that's where the sausage gets made, and that's when we can come out then and get behind an issue. But I can tell you, when it came to how we approached our fourth round of affordable housing, how we approached our third round, a number of issues when it comes to our budget and how we're balancing, budget items with what the tax impact is going to be. You got to be willing to stand up for what you want to, what you believe is the right thing for the people, and even if it's, even if people disagree. The question is, can you disagree and then continue to be able to work together, right? Because otherwise, we're not getting anything done.
So knowing this, what's one or two issues, maybe three issues, where you would say you break with the consensus of the Republican Party?
Well, there's been a few things certainly where I think I've broken with the president. I'll call it the president / the party, because depending on the issue, it may be something that more of the party has aligned with or maybe not. But again, because again, I think it comes back to the initial thing I said earlier, which is the role of the representative, in my opinion, is to represent the district. And if the president of the party is going to get behind things that I don't think are good for NJ11, I don't support them. I tell you a few things that have come up during this race. Number one was the ACA subsidies and the extension. There, you did see a handful of Republicans break from the party, but I would have voted to extend those ACA subsidies as well when they were coming to that cliff. Because again, if we're going to talk about affordability and we're going to talk about common sense and we're going to talk about ways to limit, price increases and costs on people, that was a common sense, practical way to do it, and I would have supported that. I think tariffs is probably another very big issue that's come up a number of times. I think that, look, the way that the president has kind of opted to use tariffs over the past year or so, I think is a detriment to our small business community in particular. I think you look back historically, tariffs can be very effective when they're used as a scalpel, not as a sledgehammer, right? When you have a very specific market you're targeting, a very specific commodity or product, and a very specific intended outcome for a American manufacturer or American region, right? That is a case where I think tariffs have a very strong intended impact. I think the way we've been using them lately, and the president has been kind of using them as a negotiation tool. I mean, when I've talked to small businesses, it makes it really difficult. It makes it really hard for them to plan, to forecast, to hire, right, to price their goods. And so if I think our small businesses, particularly in New Jersey, have enough regulation and challenges that the government puts on them, I think some of that uncertainty doesn't help either. So those are a few. I mean, probably the one we've gotten the most, I would say, publicity or just buzz about is the Gateway Tunnel project. Because I think I was pretty forceful there in saying that the president should not be using funding for the Gateway Tunnel as a pawn or as a poker chip and whatever the game was that he was playing. It's too many jobs. It's certainly, for any of you who commute in and out of New York, like, we cannot be playing these kind of games and impacting a district that is a very, very heavy commuter district. So, but look, and there'll be things that I agree with too, right? But it all comes down to what is good for this district.
So a bit of a lightning round. I'll ask pointed questions about certain things that people are wondering, and you can answer them.
And I'll answer them faster than I've been answering them this.
No,
we'll keep
you're
it lightning.
actually quite succinct. Good job on that. First question, who won the 2020 election?
Joe Biden won the 2020 election. That came up in the debate, by the way, if anyone hasn't watched it.
Pardoning of January 6th, people who were involved in January 6th.
Yeah, I'll be very clear on that one. January 6th was one of the darkest days in American history. I think anybody who participated in storming the Capitol should be held to the fullest account of the law, period.
The use of the National Guard in order to retain order at this moment. Of course, things can change, but in this moment.
Can I ask just for a little more clarity? And you mean like kind of going back to what was going on in like California and those kind of things? Yeah. Yeah, look, I think some of that's been interesting. I'm going to take a little bit longer with this one because I think it's been an interesting case study almost in a way of our political system, right? Our three branches of government and how they were responding to each other. I think that was probably not the first, but certainly one of the more clear examples of the executive branch pushing very hard to enact its will and seeing what the judiciary would do in terms of its role in interpreting the law and interpreting action and making a decision. And I think you've seen in numerous cases, both with the National Guard, I think most of those, you saw the judiciary step up and say, nope, this is not constitutional, and kind of force the administration to pull back. So, and in other instances, I think you've seen the judiciary uphold some of the decisions that the administration's made. And I think it's look, you want to call it a high pressure situation, I'll give you that. But I think when people say, yeah, look, this is an example of our government not, it's crumbling or it's not doing its job, I would say I think this is a pressure test to show that our government, the distinct branches are doing their job in a bit. You are seeing action being taken. You are seeing a judiciary step up. Now, we used to talk about Congress stepping up and being the first branch again. But, and that'll probably be what we talk about a little more here. But I think that was to me, I kind of took a step back and said, I think what we are seeing here is actually our government being tested. And if these three branches as they were created are going to do their job or not. And I would argue, whether you agree or disagree with the action, I would argue that our government has as a whole has passed the test of a judiciary that interprets the law and renders a ruling when an executive branch decides to take executive action.
Thank you. So a member of our congregation who couldn't be here tonight asked a question that I thought was a thoughtful question, especially given your desire to, let's say, be local in your representation. So Roxbury is in NJ11, correct?
It's actually just outside. It's
just outside.
But they're my neighbors right next door in Randolph.
All right. However, I'm sure it would have an effect. There's a strong possibility that there's going to be a 1,500 person ICE facility in Roxbury that opens. What's your position on that?
Yeah, I came out pretty early on that one because I think you're right. It's not in the district, but it certainly neighbors a number of municipalities in the district. And if my constituents are concerned about it, I feel like it's incumbent upon me to have a point of view there. And yeah, this is one, and maybe not for the same reasons as folks, but this is one I came out opposed to. I can tell you. The way this facility, at least up to this point, it was handled, first of all, just from like a lack of communication at all by the federal government with Sean and those guys over, and I know the mayor and council pretty well, and how they were kind of left in the dark. One is just never a good thing. Never a good thing for different levels of government to not be communicating with one another. But I can also tell you, purely from an operational perspective, Roxbury has a lot of the same challenges that the western municipalities in our district here have, like my community in Randolph and Jefferson and Rockaway, right? When you talk about things like water and sewer capacity, water scarcity judgments by courts that usually inhibit any kind of development going on in our communities unless they are for generally residential housing. Tax rateables on a piece of property like that is a massive blow now that they won't be able to receive, that I'm sure we're banking on in future budgets. Public safety, just generally speaking, is going to have to be upgraded a bit with something like that. So like these are all things when you look at it from the local perspective of what the impact is on a community. I think I think the mission's very important, right? To make sure we have people who are committing heinous crimes off of our streets. But I think they got it wrong in how they handled this facility. And I think in a community like Roxbury, it's going to be a huge infrastructure burden for those guys, huge.
So I want to pick up on that last point that you made, which is about getting people off the streets, right? In your mind, what does the balance look like in terms of undocumented folks? Is it pathway to citizenship one day? Is it stronger border but more openness to those who are here? Is it everyone needs to go and then eventually they can come back? What do you think, if you were designing, let's call it comprehensive immigration reform, what would that look like for you?
Yeah, well, I think like with kind of my just general approach to this role in any capacity, certainly with immigration, I think it's got to be practical here too. I think there's a number of goals that I think most people would agree on, but we have to approach it in a practical manner. I think when you have a swing to one side of, take no prisoners and everyone's got to go, right? We're seeing some challenge, we're seeing some problems occur when that type of approach is being taken. And I think when you say, just get rid of ICE or defund police, on the other side of the issue, I don't think that helps anybody either. I think you got to kind of come to the middle here a bit. If you want to talk, I'll kind of take it in two pieces, if that's all right. Cause I see the ICE situation a little bit separately from immigration reform. This obviously has been a big topic for this entire race. I think the situation with ICE, I think we have to be able to do a couple things here at once. Number one, I think we do need to get criminals who are here illegally off the streets. I think that's an important job. But I think we need to absolutely come to the table with ways to make ICE operate more effectively and more responsibly to do that. And so I've been clear, I think our party should be coming to the table with reforms to, improve or utilize better technology like body-worn cameras or better training, de-escalation techniques. These are really important things that we're seeing, I think, gaps in, and so I think we should be coming to the table with some of those improvements. But at the same time, I see a big gap on the other half of this public safety thing, which in New Jersey is a problem, which is that we are a sanctuary city, sanctuary state, and sanctuary city laws that, while maybe well-intended, what they ultimately do, I believe, is stop our local police and our county police, our sheriff's officers, who have these resources to truly help in these kind of situations to keep American citizens safe. I think it takes them off the table completely, and I think that that's a bad thing for public safety. I'll give you a quick example. I was speaking to a law enforcement officer who was kind of talking about, not having right, because our local leaders in law enforcement can't have any knowledge of where ICE is going, what they're doing, how they're doing. There's no communication allowed with our laws right now. And there's some big misses there, because our local law enforcement communities, they know our communities best, right? They're in the community, they know kind of, probably who the usual suspects are. They know what the community is about. And, I heard someone say, when we can't communicate with federal agents, if we know where they're going, we could say things like, hey, listen, if you're going into, 123 Main Street, we've been there. There's an older brother with autism, right? Like, be careful, be aware when you're going in. They can give more local nuance and more local knowledge to make sure that people are safer. And we just can't do that right now. So I would like to see, I'm absolutely willing to say we should come to the table, and my side that's been, maybe in some ways unwilling to come to the table to make some of those reforms, we should be able to, willing to come to the table. I would ask that, the other side be willing to come to the table when it comes to how we can engage our local police better here to keep people safe. And then to pivot to just, I think, immigration reform, generally speaking, this has been like a political football that no one wants to kind of pick up and run with, because it's either politically not popular for your party or it's whatever, an issue that no one's been willing to tackle. And I think it's long overdue. Because I think if you've been here in this country a long time and you've, been working hard, you've been doing things that are kind of like we talked about earlier, right? If you've been doing things the right way, if you've been paying taxes and trying to make a better life for your family, being a good member of the community, you should, in the immediacy, you should be able to we should have a much clearer, much more defined pathway to recognition for people. I think a pathway to citizenship is just inherently a much longer process. And I'm certainly, let's figure out how we can, make that a smoother process as well. But it is just inherently, years in the making. I think a pathway to recognition in the immediacy would be very beneficial, I think, to counter some of the issues we see people facing now of, people are afraid to go to the hospital if they, twist their ankle because of some issue, right? So we should be able to address that, I think, in the immediacy.
Thank you. So I want to switch gears now. We've talked about kind of America at large. We've talked about New Jersey. I want to talk a little bit about the Jewish community. We're feeling pretty scared right now. After Michigan and after basically the past number of years, we've watched anti-Semitism on the rise. And I'm curious what ideas you have when you get into Washington to combat anti-Semitism.
Yeah, look, it's something that we've seen far too much of lately. I think Temple near Tamid has seen it far too up close and personal, and especially over the past couple of years. And look, I mean, we have a very strong Jewish community out in Randolph, so we have been in lockstep with them for a long time. And I would just say, maybe before we get even to Washington, just talking about, where I've been here at the local level. I mean, I remember very distinctly, it was probably, I guess, about 2 days after October 7th, a bunch of us on the council, we came to Mount Freedom Jewish Center in Randolph, and there's no chapter in like the book on how to be a councilman to what you do in that kind of situation, but we just were together. And we were probably about 100 or so families, moms, dads, like little children, and the humanization of just what everyone was going through. I mean, put the government stuff aside and politics aside. It was literally something I will never forget. And not knowing what to do other than to just be there and to try to come together in some way to deal with the uncertainty, to deal with the fear, to deal with the anger, but do it together. And I think over the past few years, at that moment in time, it's funny, at that moment in time I thought, boy, well, at least if there's a small silver lining, at least, this will be one of those things, like maybe like a post 9/11, right? Like where, well, this will bring us together. This won't be politicized. And the fact that I was as wrong as I was about that is probably one of the things that disappoints me most about the world we're in, because obviously that wasn't the case. But so, since then we've done a number of things with our Jewish community just in Randolph, whether it's participating in the Run for Their Lives walks for the hostages, and, bringing our PD in to have more of a prominent presence in our synagogues and Chabad Center, and participating in a lot of those walks as well. So, we've been able to ensure that at the local level, we're taking the proper steps to make sure our Jewish community understands that they are valued and safe in our communities. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a number. I don't think that just stops when you get out of the local scene when it comes to politics. And I also think that it has to be more than just saying, well, I stand for our Jewish community. I think it has to be, and how are you going to stop the rhetoric that is leading to these anti-Semitic actions? So I would tell you, I could tell you 3 things right now I think that I would love to do upon going to Washington that I think are very specific for the Jewish community. Number 1, and we've seen the bill down in Trenton kind of get hung up. We don't have a bill like this in the federal level. I would absolutely be proud to sponsor and to partner. I'm sure it's something we could do across the aisle with probably Josh Gottheimer or another leader, to codify the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism into law, to make sure that law enforcement, educators, community members know that when they see a crime happen, when they know what these actions and these words mean, they can identify it and call it out and start to put an end to this kind of this rhetoric and this criminal activity that is specifically targeted at the Jewish community. Number 1. Number 2, I think we need to expand and speed up, and I would say decouple the nonprofit security grant program that has gotten hung up, I think, over the last year. That is a critical program specifically for our Jewish community. Obviously, it's bigger, but I believe it is incredibly important for the Jewish community, for synagogues and temples in our district. And I know with the whole DHS hang-up now, that's been slowed down significantly. We need to speed that up and get those programs back.
To drill down on that one, because I'm not sure everybody knows, there are 2 clauses in the next Homeland Security grant. And our congregation has gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars to harden our building, to put up, shatterproof film on our windows, to put boulders so no one can drive into the building, to put cameras all around. And if you're going to get the next set of funding, you're going to agree, number 1, to participate fully if ICE shows up, and number 2, to not engage in any
DEI programming.
DEI programs. And so what is your position on that?
Yeah, and look, I don't think security grant funding should be tied to those kind of contingencies. I just think we could debate DEI programming or ICE, right? Those are to me different conversations. They should not be tied to or hoops to jump through when it comes to securing and protecting public safety. I mean, period. So I disagree with that element of it. But I think I would like to expand and speed up the process, because I know it takes like months now, from what I understand, to apply for and see these things through. So those are two very concrete things. And the third thing, I mean, look, Israel is our lone Democrat ally in the Middle East, and we should stand in lockstep with them, I believe, at every step of the way. Just like we would for any other ally, like we would for NATO, like we would for any ally that's standing up against terrorism, against dictatorship, whatever it may be. I would be a voice for standing with our allies in Israel. So those are kind of broader scale and also smaller scale, but three very, very clear things that I would do for to support the Jewish community going down to Washington.
So I want to drill down on each of those three. I want to start with the question of rhetoric in anti-Semitism. This is a question that I'm going to ask tomorrow night as well, which is the harmful rhetoric around anti-Semitism comes on both sides of the political aisle. And I know it's probably quite easy to look on the other side of the political aisle and to look at some of the harmful rhetoric that comes out of there, right? Globalize the Intifada, for example, being one of those phrases. I'm curious, though, if you can look at your own aisle and say, what is the harmful rhetoric coming out of those who identify kind of on the Republican side? They may not be your kind of Republican. They might be further to the right than you. And what would you do to change the rhetoric in your own party?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's happening on both sides. It absolutely. I got look, to me, this is the morality of this issue has got to come first. And if I hear this kind of rhetoric on my side of the aisle, on the other side of the aisle, that does not matter to me at all. It has to be met with force. We have to call it out when we see it on both sides, because that's the only way that we're going to get this stuff to stop. If we allow it to be normalized, if it's my party, it's okay. I'm not going to really come down on this guy because I don't know. These guys like Fuentes and these people with these crazy ideas, like that. Harmful rhetoric is harmful rhetoric. It's got to stop. I mean, maybe different people are listening to that rhetoric than listening to rhetoric on the left, but it doesn't matter. The outcome is the same, which is danger and death potentially for our Jewish communities. So I think that's why I said earlier, it's not just enough to say, hey, yes, I'm a pro-Israel candidate, or I'm stand for my Jewish community. We have to stand against the anti-Semitic rhetoric wherever it happens. And it can't be, we can't just kind of pick and choose because, it's my side or their side. It's got to stop across the board. And, the justification, right? It's like the justification steps that get taken. It's like, well, it's not negative against our Jewish community. It's just, genocide in Gaza, or it's just war crimes by Netanyahu. Like, people have to understand. That is the rhetoric that leads to actions like Molotov cocktails being thrown through windows. That is what it is exactly. And we have to be able to stand up and call it out on either side, because if we don't do it, that's the kind of rhetoric that will, go down that steep slope and go down and lead to disaster and to potential violent acts. So this one is it's a very passionate one for me, and I don't know. I keep going on it, but I'll stop there for the sake of time. But I think where I'm at on it, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk about the war right now. We're all thinking about it, and I'm curious where you sit right now in this current moment with this current war.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I've stuck by the ultimate outcome here that I've believed from the beginning, which is that I believe under no circumstance can Iran be able to possess a nuclear weapon, have the capabilities to create a nuclear weapon. That is a global danger. It's a danger to America. It's a danger, obviously, to our allies in Israel, and even in Europe, as we've seen with how some of the range of their weaponry already. So I believe we need to accomplish that mission. Look, I think we all would like it to be accomplished via diplomacy, but that clearly was not able to happen. And so, I think the way we've approached it and the air superiority we've shown and the dominance and the ability to render, I think Iran pretty effectively incapacitated at this point. I'm supportive of that. Again, if it means protecting American lives and stopping their capability of producing nuclear weaponry. I think the question right now is is the secretary and the president going to decide to put boots on the ground to open up the strait and do anything? That at this point in time, I'm not supportive of. I think we've been very effective in the way we've been handling already through the air, through drone technology, through superior ballistic missiles and things like that. And I think we can finish the job in that way and avoid, I think, what everyone wants to avoid, which is a prolonged kind of endless war or just having those American potential for more American casualties on the ground. But I think we need to accomplish that mission because it's an important one for American safety and for Israel's safety.
I'm wondering about aid to Israel. This is going to be a huge hot button issue when it eventually comes up again. And I have a feeling just from reading the tea leaves that you're going to find that there are going to be people on both sides of the aisle who either don't want the aid to happen or make the aid contingent. And so there may be pressure within your own party. I'm not sure it's necessarily partisan anymore. Where are you on contingencies around aid to Israel? Is it absolute? And what is our obligation vis-a-vis aid to Israel?
Yeah, I don't support conditioning any aid to Israel. They are our ally. We should stand with them 100% like we would for any other ally around the world, who especially an ally who is staring terrorism in the face, who is a stone's throw away from numerous regimes who would love to see them not exist anymore on the planet. I mean, we have to call this stuff what it is that's going on in the Middle East. And when you have the lone democracy in the region under constant threat, and they are our ally, we need to stand with them 100%. And by the way, like I said earlier, I think we need to stand with all of our allies 100%, right? I mean, I know we're seeing some issues with NATO right now and how that's been going with Iran, and I don't support our NATO allies kind of giving us the stiff arm a little bit on some of these things, but it doesn't mean I don't support we're going to back out of NATO, we're going to rethink this whole thing. I think that's a mistake too. By the way, I also think it was a mistake to and I think my side of the aisle was doing this a bit as well, to try to potentially condition aid with Ukraine taking on an authoritarian dictator in Vladimir Putin who was invading their country. Like we have to and call me old school, I don't know, but I think the world is a safer place when America leads through strength, through standing with other democracies, other defenders of freedom around the world. And so, I believe we can, I don't buy into this binary choice here where we have to pick or choose between having a strong global presence to ensure security and safety around the world and being able to handle domestic issues. This is America. I believe America is the greatest country in the world, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can tackle issues at home, we can stand with our allies, we can make sure the world is a safer place.
So it's clear that you're a very strong supporter of Israel and a big ally to the Jewish community and to Israel as well. We at our congregation do care tremendously as well for the Palestinian community. And I'm curious, what does an end game look like? I know that right now the peace looks further from ever, but in a perfect world, let's say avenues for peace opens up. Who makes that peace? Who brings that peace? Who figures out the future of Israel for those Israeli Jews living there, but also those Palestinians living there as well?
Well, I think Israel has a big role to play in that. I believe they have a right to self-determination, and they should have a major decision point when it comes to if we can get to a point where peace is on the table, what that looks like. I mean, look, I think you're going to see the Western powers and the U.S. play a role there as well. But look, I mean, It's hard for me to say, what exactly is the ideal outcome, because I mean, I just think there's a huge number of variables that can go into it. I think what I care most about is that the nation of Israel, again, I kind of keep going back to this, but the lone democracy, ally of ours, and don't forget, right, this is just military, a huge economic partner, huge partner for us in terms of manufacturing and other things like that, right? That they're in a place where their people are safe from attack and can operate independently and go about their lives the way we do here and take things for granted. I mean, that would be the ultimate option for me. How we get there exactly, I don't know that I can give you an honest answer sitting here right now with the limited knowledge that I have. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but that's the outcome I'd like to see.
We'll instead of looking at some kind of utopian peace in the future, let's look just in the immediate couple months. It's looking more and more like Hamas is refusing to lay down its weapons. What do you think should be the next steps then if they do?
Well, I think we need to keep doing what we're doing. I think we've destroyed something like 13,000 points of interest and targets in the country right now. And we need to continue to dominate the country until we achieve this mission here. Again, I think we're doing it in an effective manner. So I don't think that needs to change. I also don't think it necessarily would take a very long time to do that. I know Secretary Rubio came out maybe 3 days ago now and it talked about seeing some kind of end in sight within the next couple weeks. And I think you see some of the chicken going on between what Iran's saying, what the president's saying, and who's going to kind of blink first on some of this. That doesn't surprise me. I think that's maybe to be expected, but I think we continue to do what we do, which is be the strongest military force in the world, and continue to execute until the mission's achieved.
So my question actually was, because you answered Iran, which is a really important question. My question was about Gaza and Hamas.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Well, look, I mean, and I know we kind of, sorry, I'm got my head on Iran here. I know that we, did see at least some peace be brokered, right, with the hostages being returned. I think that was huge. And I'm obviously very glad to see that happened.
And then the next step is a demilitarized Gaza, which is looking more and more like Hamas is going to remain recalcitrant and doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, unlikely. Yeah, it's one of those things where if they're not willing to play ball, I don't think we can. I don't think it's a thing where the U.S. or Israel has to kind of just continue to go through the process here. If the other side's not willing to come to the table and show some semblance of conceding to an agreement that they originally made with the state of Israel and the United States and other powers as well, then they're on the hook. Like, we have to put responsibility at some point here on the terrorists who are the ones engaging in this kind of fear mongering or war mongering in this case, and so they need to be held accountable.
Thank you. So I'm going to get the questions in a moment. I have 2 other final questions to ask before we move into the questions from the audience. And as I run over there, what I'll do, what? Yes, if anybody has questions, feel free to pass them over in that direction. But 2 other questions. Number 1, if you had your druthers and you could choose what 2 committees that you would get assigned to when you would get into the House, what would be those 2 committees?
Good question. All right, so I'll give you a short term and a long term, because I think right, this is a special election that we're running for here. So this is like, we got 6 months and then we're running again and all that. But right, it's like, okay, how do we go down and actually be effective right away? I think transportation and infrastructure is a committee that I could come on right away and bring resources back to the state. We talked about whether it's, the issues that we have out by me out on Route 80 where you got sinkholes like cratering into the earth, or, NJ Transit issues over here that we could bring resources back directly to help improve, whether it's our stations, whether it's the existing rails, whether it's, looking into one-seat ride options. I think money can come back to the district very quickly to help improve our infrastructure needs, and I think that's something that can be done in a relatively fast manner. So that would be one I would like to be a part of right away. But also, longer term and just I think impact-wise, energy and commerce is a really important one, right? I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, especially in our district where you have, we do have a lot of large, corporations, a lot of large businesses throughout the district, right? This is an area where, from an oversight perspective and also from a just effectiveness perspective, making sure that our employers here and that employ many members of our communities are, either benefiting or being able to benefit our communities in a greater capacity. I think that's really important. But also the energy piece of that, because energy prices in New Jersey are worse than anywhere else in the country. I believe I think it's a little bit to blame on both sides. I think what we've seen recently in New Jersey, kind of going from a kind of your traditional, more supply and demand type of ratio, where we've gone to this, all electric mandate that I believe has completely artificially, crushed our supply without addressing demand and has led to the pricing issues that we've seen. I believe we have to take an all of the above approach to energy. So, from nuclear to LNG to land-based wind to, solar and things when we can get there. I just don't think we have the capacity to engage in those forms of energy right now in an affordable way, because energy right now is just hitting people's pockets so hard. Energy and Commerce Committee, I think, is a way we can, not quickly, but very directly make some very important changes to our energy system here.
So final question as I go and get the other questions. This is going to be the last question I ask tomorrow night too. Who is a Democrat currently in power that you admire?
I've gotten I'll kind of give you two, and then it's cheating, but I think Senator Fetterman is someone who's stepped up and surprised me in a number of different ways. Hopefully I don't dress the same way as him, though. I know he's got quite a different brand than me, maybe, but I think he's someone who has been shown also a willingness to stand what he believes in, and if it means going against his party, he's shown the chops and the willingness to do that. But I also think our neighbor right next door in District 5, Josh Gottheimer, who I certainly don't agree with on everything, but you want to talk about a guy who prides himself on bringing resources back to Bergen County and back to his district. I think he's done a really good job of that. I know he's a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus as well, which is another group that I would want to be a part of, that brings Republicans and Democrats together. You get the trend for me. I don't really care what side of the aisle people are on. If they're willing to come to the table and say, you don't agree with everything I say, I'm not going to agree with everything you say, but we have a job to do to represent the people that send us down here and to move legislation forward. That is how Congress can lead again. Those are people I can get behind.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a few questions. I've got a bunch here. We'll see how many we get through. All right. The SAVE Act. Where are you on that? And define it for everyone also, if they don't know what that is. Yeah,
so the SAVE Act is a voter integrity, election integrity bill that's in both the Senate and the House. Look, I think election integrity is an important issue. I think it's something that most Americans, feel is important. I think it's one of those 80-20 kind of rules, and so I'm supportive of the SAVE Act. I think if we can take steps to shore up our elections, it's obviously probably the most critical and foundational, right of Americans. And so if we can take steps to ensure that it is safe and secure, I think it's a good thing. Look, I also think, I don't think it's that far of a stretch to ask people to have IDs, right? I mean, we need them for like how many other things, right? Whether you're boarding a plane, whether you're, buying a beer, right? We need ID. It's not unheard of for us. And it's also something that a number of other Western democracies use as well, whether it's Great Britain, Germany, Canada, they all have similar laws. And I certainly don't think we hear a lot of issues when it comes to disenfranchisement or anything like that. I'm not the one thing I'm not a fan of, just kind of the whole conversation here is that minority Americans are somehow unable to obtain basic government IDs for stuff. I think that's the one piece to me that's felt a little discriminatory potentially in this whole conversation. But I think broadly speaking, if we can take steps to ensure election integrity, I think we should. That also, by the way, I'll just add too, right? Because usually the follow-up there. This doesn't mean I think that there's like widespread fraud occurring, across New Jersey. I don't think that, but I think if we can take steps to make sure that voting is more secure, why would we not do it?
Israel's position vis-a-vis the West Bank, is it their right to annex the West Bank if they decided that they wanted to grow settlements? Where are you on Israel and the West Bank?
Well, I mean, look, I would say it's, to me, I think I think the big difference that we see in people's positions on this from time to time, I think it's when we kind of go to the one state versus the two state conversation, where that's where I think things get a little scary. I don't think like a one state situation is ever going to be a good thing for the Jewish people. I think it needs to continue to operate in a two state environment. But look, I don't think that. I think the way Israel is operating when it comes to the West Bank, when it comes to Palestinians, I mean, look, they have to operate within the general confines of international law and policy as well, and that doesn't mean that they don't certainly have the ear of other nations that can kind of help broker peace and make sure that safety occurs. But again, at the end, I think they need to make the right decisions themselves.
Thank you. You spoke about immigration, birthright citizenship. Where are you on that?
Birthright citizenship's in the Constitution. It's very interesting to me that where we're seeing this go with the Supreme Court. I guess the political, the political science major in me is very interested in the arguments being made, but I believe birthright citizenship is foundational to what it means to be American and should not be revoked or changed.
Abortion rights. What is your view on choice, women's access to the pill, to abortion? Should it be left up to the states? Where are you on abortion rights?
So yeah, I'm a pro-choice candidate. I have two little daughters at home, and I believe that women have a right to their own medical decisions. I believe I trust women to make their own medical decisions. I would hope that when my daughters become of age, that they have a right to make their own medical decisions, and that the government isn't making those decisions for them. And I know that's probably less popular in my side of the aisle, but that's okay. I don't support a national ban on abortion, and I also am supportive, I should say, of IVF treatment as a critical tool for people who want to start a family that otherwise can't. So.
This is a little more hard-hitting than I normally would ask if I was asking it.
All right, bring it on.
What grade, A through F, would you give to President Trump?
I haven't gotten that one yet. I've gotten obviously plenty of Trump questions. We haven't gotten the grade. So you guys get to be the first to hear my grade. Look, I'd give him a B minus. I'd give him a B minus. I don't know if that's good. What was that, good or bad? F, an F. Okay, this is an F crowd. All right. Hey, look, a B minus. If I was in Jefferson Township, I'd be getting whacked for not giving him an A. Come on, guys. Now, look, this goes back to what I said earlier. If the president is doing things that I think are good for our district, I will support those policies. If he's doing things that I don't think are good for the district, I won't. Look, I think there's a lot of things you've seen Republicans and the president do that are good for our district. I think particularly when it comes to things like affordability, right? We saw the SALT deduction cap go from $10,000 to $40,000. By the way, it needs to go away completely, but we're heading in the right direction. That puts money back in people's pockets, right? No taxes on tips, on Social Security. These are things, if we're going to talk about affordability and we're finding ways to put money back in people's pockets, I support those policies. But if he's going to do things like hold up the Gateway Tunnel project, talk about shuttering Picatinny Arsenal, which is a huge base here, huge employer, or tariffs, right? Things like that too. If they're not good for the district, then I don't support them. But again, like to me, it's not just, it's about the district first. And I don't know, I think at the end of the day, you know, if we're sending more people to Washington, regardless of where they're at on the spectrum, that care about their district first and vote for the district and not for the party, not for the president, not for the squad, vote for the district, we'll be in a much better place.
So final question, and thank you for your candor. By the way, I appreciate the fact that you even tried to give a number, because a letter, because there is no way that you could have given a letter that would make everybody in this room.
That's how you stuck me on that one. But that's okay. Hey, listen, that's, you know, look, it's all good. Hey, we want to get that grade up. Let's quit playing games with the Gateway Tunnel. Let's figure out. Let's get tariffs back to the way they should be, and let's make sure Picatinny Arsenal is going to stay here and be a huge. Then we can move it up the grade scale. But until we do that, if it's not good for the district, I'm not going for it.
Thank you. So the final question is. Someone wrote, I'll read it just word for word. I am a centrist and an anti-Trumper. How can you convince me to vote for you?
I like this one. So I will give you, I think it's kind of the humorous part of it, but it has, you know, a nugget of truth in it as well. So what I would say, well, one, I hope a number of the things I just said would give anybody who has any concern about me being just a rubber stamp for the president or for the party. I would hope that my positions that I've talked about tonight show you that that is not the case for me. That truly the reason I want to go to Washington is to do what is right for our district. But don't forget, this is a special election. So we have another election in 6 months. So you have an opportunity tonight, all you Democrats in the room especially, you have an opportunity to test drive a Republican for the next 6 months. You get to see how I handle, see how I hug the curves, you know, see how my gas mileage, test me out, and guess what? And if you don't like me, you can bring me back in November, kick me out and send someone else down. I say it jokingly, but I mean it in one way, you know, kidding aside, right? We do have actually a very unique opportunity here. You don't see a lot of special elections come around very often. I think the last time NJ11 had a special election was like 50 years ago. So it does give you, the voter, a unique opportunity to say, okay, I got one candidate here, I got one candidate here. I have an opportunity now to hold them to account more directly than really in any other election you would ever get the opportunity to do that, right? Because in a normal congressional race, you still are waiting 2 years, right? 2 years is a lifetime in politics. Right now, we have 6 months. So you can say today, you know what? Maybe I'm on board with what Joe's saying, or maybe I'm on board with what Mahia's saying, but you know, I'm gonna give him a shot, and I'm gonna hold him to what he said. And if he goes to Washington and he doesn't do what he said, I'm gonna kick him out. You have that opportunity. Whether you want to call it test driving or whatever it is, but you have that opportunity here. So, you know, I would ask that if you're considering voting for me, and look, I get it. I'm pretty self-aware, right? I get the general issue with our district when I talk to a lot of people is people's points of view on the president. So, you know, you have an opportunity here to say, listen, here's what Joe's saying. If I believe it, if I think it's the best thing for my district, if I think he's the right guy, I'm going to vote for him now, and I have a very clear window to hold him accountable as my representative for what he said he's going to do. And if he does it, then you got a chance. Maybe you give me another 2 years, and if not, you can go the other way. But that's actually one of the nice things I think about the situation we're with the special, and the fact that you guys do have that you kind of, you know, no risk guarantee, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to this vote.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you again for Carrie Shavat, who set tonight up. I had asked that we held any reactions. Now feel free to applaud. And
thank you.
And we'll see you back hopefully tomorrow night as we talk to Anna Lilia Mejia. Thank you.
Really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.